You didn't land here by accident. Something in you recognized a signal before your mind had language for it. A quiet pull from the future you that sent a pulse backward through time and asked you to press play right now. Feel the proof in your own body, the coolness of the inhale, the warmth of the exhale, the delicate pause in between. That pause is not empty. It is arrival. You are standing inside the sacred still point, where an old identity dissolves, and a truer one begins pressing against the edges of your awareness like dawn hidden just below the horizon. The routines that once numbed now feel too tight. The conversations that used to soothe now ring hollow. And the stability you thought you could count on is creaking not because you failed, but because you've outgrown the room. What you're calling collapse is actually calibration. The fire you feel behind you isn't here to punish you. It is here to protect you from turning around, plank by plank, burning away the smaller stories that cannot carry the frequency you're emitting now. Stay with your breath and let your shoulders lower by a fraction, the jaw unclench by a thread, the chest open by a few honest millimeters. Nothing dramatic, just enough space for truth to land. The old map can't help you in this territory because you're not retracing paths. You are becoming a path. You can feel the shell separating from who you are, tightness in the throat, pressure in the ribs, a restlessness that used to read as anxiety and now announces itself as birth. The mind will try to name this as a problem to fix. Let it learn what your deeper intelligence already knows. Silence is not abandonment. It is construction. The outer world is catching up to the inner upgrade. And while it does, your job is simple and brave. Stay coherent. In this room between breaths, you're not required to perform a miracle. You're invited to remember you are one. The universe doesn't need louder effort from you. It needs a clearer signal. When your emotion and intention agree, reality tunes to you with almost mathematical precision, and the people, timings, and opportunities that belong to your new station begin to find you without you tearing your voice to call for them. If this lands in your chest like a soft click, let that be your first confirmation. Place one hand over your heart for a beat and feel the rhythm that has carried you to this threshold. You are not late and you are not lost. You are at the 0 point, where inhale remembers, exhale releases, and in the stillness between them a life reorganizes. From this moment forward, we will travel together with language that is both poetic and practical, turning quantum metaphor into daily navigation. I will not ask you to become someone else. I will show you how to choose the self you actually are and hold it long enough for the field to recognize you. We will translate the heat behind you as liberation, the fog ahead as protection, and the emptiness around you as the womb of what is forming. You will learn how to stop collapsing into yesterday's reflex and start selecting today's coherence, not by force, but by breath, posture, and a handful of precise choices repeated until they become your new automatic. If you can feel the invitation, answer it in a way your nervous system understands. Breathe once more, slightly longer on the way out than on the way in, and let your face remember softness. Then make a simple promise to yourself in plain words you can live. I will hold the note. From here, your old timeline continues to fall silent behind you, not because something went wrong, but because something finally aligned. And as we begin, I'm going to ask you for 2 small acts that anchor this crossing in the physical world. If this message resonates, type 111 in the comments. 111 as a clear code for alignment and new beginnings, a simple I'm in to the version of you that is already arriving. And if you want more of this precise, steady guidance as you stabilize the new, subscribe now so we can keep practicing coherence together, quietly and consistently, until the extraordinary becomes your ordinary. What you are calling breakdown is the first language of growth, the heat that loosens the old scaffolding so a truer structure can take its place. The unmistakable moment when a container that once protected you can no longer hold the size of your becoming. The mind, trained by years of equating stability with safety, tries to prosecute the present as a crime scene. You replay the conversation that ended, you audit the opportunity that slipped, you trace red string between decisions and conclude that somewhere you must have failed. Yet if you let the body speak before the courtroom opens, you will notice a different testimony, breath that wants to lengthen, shoulders that want to fall, A chest that aches not from damage but from the pressure of wings against a chrysalis that has done its job. Loss is not proof that you did something wrong. It is often proof that you did something right for long enough that the growth it produced no longer fits in the room that held it. The house is not collapsing because you were careless. It is being dismantled because it cannot host the future you any longer. Imagine the old narrative as a greenhouse built for a sapling. Glass warmed by familiar sun, wind softened to a whisper, soil prearranged so roots can learn the art of reaching without being torn by storms too soon. You needed that shelter. It was wisdom to accept it. But a greenhouse that never opens becomes a mausoleum. The very protection that nurtured you becomes the ceiling that stunts you. So life, obeying the physics of expansion, removes pains one by one. Cold air enters. New light arrives at angles that feel unflattering at first. Branches tremble at the first touch of weather. The reflex is to scream for the glass to return, to call the draft cruelty and the exposure punishment. But if you stay one breath longer than panic, you will feel the coded mercy in the wind. It is teaching your system reality at scale. It is introducing you to the very elements your height requires. The door was not slammed. It was opened. That shiver in your ribs is not a sign you did it wrong. It is your first proof that you will be able to live outside and not only survive, but photosynthesize. This is where language becomes medicine. The words you choose to describe a transition calibrate the chemistry with which you meet it. Call it failure and the body braces. Call it punishment, and your attention becomes a weapon you turn against yourself. Call it abandonment, and the nervous system will search for rescuers rather than resources. Rename it promotion and the posture changes. Promotion does not deny discomfort. It frames it as the price of altitude, the tenderness of muscles learning a new reach, the ache not of injury, but of growth. When a relationship dissolves, the old narrative searches for villains or flaws. The promoted narrative listens for truth. What lesson has completed? What dignity wants protecting? What pattern has delivered all it can, and now asks to be released without being turned into an enemy? When a role ends, the old mind rehearses scarcity. The promoted mind asks which gift was being underused, which courage was going unfunded, which appetite was smuggled into weekends because weekdays could not bear it. These are not philosophical games. They are levers that move biology. The story you hold recruits breath, summons or softens adrenaline, and determines whether your day is spent repairing a self-image or building a new structure that fits. Begin at the only place that answers honestly: sensation. The body registers truth faster than the narrator can invent it. Think of the option to go back. Before the mind compiles arguments, visit the chest and ask it how that path feels. If it tightens and heat rises in the throat, that is data, not disloyalty. The contraction is not an insult to your past. It is a measurement of compatibility. Likewise, bring the possibility of going forward into your belly and listen for the micro-expansion. The breath that arrives without being asked. The subtle lift at the back of the neck as if a thread were drawing you toward horizon. This is not magical thinking. It is how organisms navigate change when they are not bullied by concepts, toward warmth, toward space, toward the rhythm that steadies rather than the rush that dazzles. Choose according to that compass and you stop asking the mind to generate confidence from nothing. You let the body supply it as a signal that it recognizes home in the direction you are walking. There is a discipline here that is gentler than grit and stronger than denial. You agree to meet each symptom of collapse as information rather than indictment. Restlessness is information that energy once spent on maintaining a false stability has suddenly been freed and is looking for a truer assignment. Grief is information that a chapter completed without ceremony and deserves a clean ending, so the next can begin without inheriting unwashed dishes. Silence from people who once crowded your calendar is information that the algorithm of your life is unfollowing what cannot travel. Even the fog that makes you doubt yourself is information that your system is refusing to harden into an identity too soon, protecting your future from the violence of premature certainty. If you can bear not knowing for a few beats longer than you're used to, the fog becomes a womb, and the instinct to fill the room with any furniture at all, especially the old, begins to feel less like safety and more like sabotage. Promotion demands one more fidelity, action that matches the new story. Insight without embodiment turns into a museum of almosts, rooms full of framed revelations with no doors to walk through. The action need not be dramatic, and grand gestures often betray insecurity more than conviction. Remove one object that is an altar to a life you are no longer obligated to worship. Say one boundary that leaves your throat cleaner rather than raw from arguments you keep losing because you enter them braced. Begin one practice so small it cannot impress anyone but your nervous system. A breath extended by one honest count before you reply. A morning posture that declares availability rather than apology. A sentence you replace because it always smuggles defeat into your day. These micro-acts are not content for a highlight reel. They are mortar. They harden slowly and quietly into a foundation that can carry rooms you couldn't build when you were busy holding the roof up with your hands. There will be pressure to prove that you are handling it well, to perform resilience in a way that wins applause. But performance is expensive, and the invoice always arrives when you are most tender. Let your progress be local first. Let your body be the first witness. Let regulation be your metric, not reputation. When the mind panics and petitions for control, return to the simple choreography that has never failed you. Unclench the jaw by a thread, lower the shoulders by a breath. Lengthen the exhale until the body remembers it is allowed to receive air without permission. From there, let the next right sentence rise, the one that does not have to be clever to be clean. Precision over pressure again and again, until the day organizes around a calmer author. Expect, too, the old map to send ambassadors, an invitation that smells like validation but tastes like shrinking. A person who once defined your worth arriving with the same script in a new costume, an opportunity that offers speed in exchange for intimacy with yourself. You have already practiced how to answer without anger. You do not need to wage war on the past to honor the present. You can bless what was, thank it for its shelter, and decline its terms with a voice that does not rise to convince. This is what promotion sounds like when it is not cosplaying power. A calm no that needs no footnotes. A redirected yes that costs less than it used to. A schedule that has learned to protect mornings like topsoil. The field understands this language and responds with higher resolution timing than before, not because you are suddenly favored, but because you have become readable. Notice what changes when you stop asking collapse to return your exact preferences and start letting it return your exact proportions. The rooms you enter feel bigger because you are no longer crouching to fit inside them. The conversations you have feel truer because you are not auditioning for belonging you already granted yourself. The work you do begins to compound because you are not spending your dividends repairing a self built out of other people's weather. Even the pace of your day alters. Time stretches at the edges where you are present and compresses where you stop bleeding energy into arguments with reality. People will call you lucky. You will recognize logistics finally free of the tax of pretending. If doubt visits, and it will, remember that it speaks with the confidence of a historian and the accuracy of a gossip. Doubt has archives, not prophecy. It can cite sources from every moment you tried and slipped, can produce footnotes from chapters you wrote with a smaller hand, can replay films of you before your voice dropped into the register that now steadies rooms. Smile at its scholarship, and then consult the only metric that matters, how your body responds to the life you are building. If the breath arrives easier, if the spine remembers height without pain, if evenings end with a little power unspent, then the verdict is already in. Collapse did not end you. It promoted you. And promotion, while it may not come with a parade, always comes with a view that makes sense of every plank that had to burn. Hold this understanding, like a quiet compass, as we continue. You are not repairing a failure. You are fitting your life to your right size. The pieces falling away are not precious artifacts stolen in the night. They are castings removed after the sculpture set. Meet each shift with the tenderness of someone unwrapping a gift that took years to arrive, not because patience makes you holy, but because haste would make you clumsy. If you can honor this pace, you will discover that what looks like the end of a timeline is simply the beginning of your true architecture taking shape. Beam by beam, breath by breath, in a house that does not require you to crouch to call it home. There is a chamber between what has ended and what has not yet taken form. A quiet interval where the world mistakes your stillness for nothingness, while everything essential is being rewired out of sight. This is the portal. It does not announce itself with trumpets. It arrives as an unfamiliar hush, fewer calls, fewer invitations, fewer conflicts to defend. The social weather thins and the old identity loosens like a jacket you no longer notice until it slips from your shoulders. You try to introduce yourself and the words feel one size too small. Sleep is shallow, the ground feels far, thoughts flicker like birds in a changing sky. You have not failed. You are between breaths. Exhale, letting go of what cannot travel. Inhale, not yet claimed by the next life. In this interval, panic wants to decorate the room with whatever furniture you can drag in, even if it pinches. But the portal is not a space to fill. It is a frequency to hold. Sit with the emptiness until you can hear its machinery. The precise click of timelines being sutured, the soft hum of new patterns downloading, the subtle pulse that says, do less, become more. Presence here is not laziness. It is obedience to construction. Your body will tell you the truth before your mind consents to it. Feet that barely feel the earth are not proof that you've lost your way. They are evidence that your system is detaching from an old grid. A tight chest is not a verdict. It is a seam being opened so your breath can fit a wider world. Even the dizziness has a function. It keeps you from sprinting back to what used to stabilize you. When you name these sensations as recalibration rather than pathology, fear loses its badge. You stop treating symptoms as enemies and start reading them as schematics. Silence, too, is holy here. It is not the universe turning its back. It is the universe clearing a runway. In the absence of noise, guidance grows audible, small. Exact instructions that would drown under yesterday's momentum. Drink water before you answer. Look out the window before you decide. Breathe once longer than your habit before you speak. These are not trivialities. They are the hinges on which new doors swing. The only compass that works inside the portal is coherence. Logic wants maps. Coherence wants rhythm. Ask your body the simplest question possible when choosing even tiny actions. Does this bring contraction or expansion? Contraction tightens the ribs, makes the throat narrow, rushes the voice. Expansion softens the face, returns warmth to the hands, lets the next breath arrive without supervision. Follow expansion by inches, and the day arranges itself with a mercy your plans could not engineer. Resist the urge to collapse the wave into an old particle just to escape uncertainty. Premature certainty is the most polite form of self-sabotage. Let potential stay plural for a little longer than is comfortable, and the clearest singular will select itself, often quietly, often in the form of a sentence that feels like it has always been waiting in your mouth. To endure this interval without turning it into self-violence, practice the simplest choreography you own. One hand on the chest, one on the lower belly. Inhale evenly, exhale a beat longer. Feel the instant of stillness before the next inhale begins, and recognize it as the portal embodied. No rush, no performance, only readiness. Lift your gaze a few degrees above the horizon, not a pose, a permission. It tells your system, I'm available for life. Then move one thing, your posture, your sentence, your schedule, so that it matches the future rather than apologizes for the past. Do not audition for the new timeline. Sit in its chair, however briefly, and let your nervous system memorize the view. Repeat this in unremarkable moments until the unremarkable becomes the proof. The portal is not passed by grand gestures. It is passed by fidelity to small, precise acts that keep your field clean while the scaffolding rises. If this stillness feels like it's speaking your native language for the first time, answer it with a simple mark in the world. Type 111 in the comments to seal your entry. 111, one breath, one choice, one new beginning. Let it be your compact with yourself. I will not rush out of the pause. I will let the right door open because my frequency is ready, not because my fear is loud. Imagine your life not as a line marching forward, but as a sea of signals surrounding you, each station a different version of you already broadcasting. Some stations hum with urgency and tightness, others carry a steadier rhythm, and every day your attention is the dial deciding which one becomes audible. Before observation, you are a wave of possibilities. With observation, you become a particle, a single clear tone that reality can organize around. The mistake is thinking you must force the world to change first. The truth is quieter. The world is waiting for your signal to stabilize. Attention is not casual. It is an instrument. Where you aim it, patterns form. Where you withdraw it, patterns decay. Spend it on fear and you amplify static. Spend it on coherence, and you hear the music that was faint a moment before. Think of the moments when you absent-mindedly replay an old argument or imagine a future that punishes you in advance. That rehearsal is not neutral background noise. It is a broadcast. You are spending attention as if it were cheap, and your biology pays the bill in shallow breath and hurried muscles. The dial slides toward a station where life has to be braced for. Shift one notch toward presence and your chemistry shifts with it. This is not wishful thinking. It is mechanics. Emotions are electrical, intentions magnetic, and together they condition the field around you to either anticipate threat or read for opportunity. The adjustment is small enough to be missed by anyone watching you from across the room. A longer exhale, a jaw unhooked by a few honest millimeters, a gaze softened as if the horizon widened. But under the surface, the wave is narrowing. You are selecting a timeline that requires less cleanup and more creation. The radio metaphor matters because it rescues you from the perfectionism of figuring it all out. You do not need to compose the symphony of your future in one sitting. You need only to stop blasting static. Static is the compulsion to check, to doom scroll, to rehearse catastrophes, to argue with what already happened as if your body were a courtroom and panic the prosecutor. Clarity, by contrast, is unremarkable. It is a body that breathes like it has time. It is a spine that lifts without theatrics. It is a mind that asks fewer, better questions and waits long enough to hear an answer that does not shout. When you choose clarity, even in a tiny action, delaying a reply by one breath, drinking water before deciding, standing instead of shrinking in your chair, you change the modulation of your signal. The field hears. Timing improves. People show up as if their calendars were quietly rearranged. The path that kept hiding in the fog starts leaving footprints you can follow without sprinting. The old you will protest with credible evidence. It will point to years when nothing seemed to move unless you pushed hard. It will cite the days when vigilance felt like intelligence, when anxiety seemed indistinguishable from ambition. But notice the hidden tax of that strategy. The hours spent repairing tone after a hastily sent message, the evenings used to calm a body you exhausted by noon, the relationships that required apologies for the sharpness you didn't mean but couldn't avoid. Tuning is cheaper. You do not need a new personality. You need a new habit of selection. When a decision arrives, ask the single question that never lies. Does this choice produce contraction or expansion in my body? Contraction is the chest caving by a fraction, breath cutting short, the throat narrowing as if words must be forced. Expansion is the subtle lift at the back of the neck, warmth returning to your hands, the exhale arriving on its own. Choose expansion not as a virtue but as a measurement of signal quality. Over time, these tiny votes accumulate into a station shift that others call luck because they did not see the quiet dials you turned. Synchronicity is the earliest feedback that your dial is locking in. It will not always look grand. Sometimes it is a conversation that arrives at the exact minute the old anxiety would have compelled you to overreach. Sometimes it is a number that repeats on the dashboard just as your breath lengthens, a nudge to keep your hands off the panic button. Treat these as engineering confirmations, not magical trophies. Acknowledge them with the same calm you want your life to adopt. I'm aligned, you can say inwardly, and then return to the next ordinary act as if it were a continuation of the signal rather than an interruption of it. The extraordinary uses ordinary doorways on purpose. They are everywhere, and they cost you less than the drama you used to pay with. There will be relapses into static. The mind will announce emergencies that are only echoes, and you will feel the pull to retune yourself to the station of speed. This is the real test of authorship. You do not pass by clenching harder. You pass by remembering how quickly a dial can move with a gentle hand. One steadier breath, one small softening, one sentence replaced because the old one always smuggled defeat into your day. Feel the immediate chemistry change when you do this. Your chest confirms the selection faster than your thoughts can. The new particle forms not as a fantasy, but as a sensation so stable it doesn't need defending. The call you dreaded becomes a clean exchange. The task you were postponing organizes itself under your calmer gaze. The afternoon you feared would drown you becomes navigable without theatrics. Attention is currency, and the market always clears by evening. If you spend it on rehearsing injuries and anticipating disasters, you arrive at night with little left to invest in rest, and tomorrow inherits your debt. If you invest it in presence, even in humble amounts, sleep becomes a continuation of coherence, not a collapse into unconsciousness. You wake without a rescue mission. Mornings stop needing heroics. The first collapse of the day belongs to you because you've trained for it, and your body recognizes your signal faster than your habits do. This is how wave becomes particle on purpose. You are not hypnotizing yourself into delusion. You are selecting a reality whose physics rewards steadiness over spectacle. Let this be your quiet vow as you move forward. Tune first, then act. Not because action doesn't matter, but because action taken off station multiplies repairs. You are allowed to take 10 seconds to become the person who should send that message before you send it. You are allowed to pause at the top of the stair and remember your height before you enter the room. You are allowed to leave a little silence around your name until your frequency arrives to fill it. In that permission, the world you live in stops behaving like an opponent and starts behaving like a responsive instrument. You will play it with fewer notes and make more music, and when someone asks what changed, you won't have a dramatic story. You will have a practice, a hand on the dial, a breath on the edge of the next choice, and a life that keeps turning wave into form with a precision that looks like grace. Ideas don't change your life until your body can carry them without flinching. Insight is a spark. Embodiment is the wiring that lets the light stay on. You have felt the difference. There are days when clarity floods your mind and you vow to live differently. And then the first email arrives, the first delay appears, the first face asks you to be smaller, and the vow evaporates because your nervous system was still tuned for the previous weather. Embodiment is the gentle, relentless art of teaching your biology the truth your awareness already knows. It is less spectacular than revelation and far more consequential. It begins in the most forgiving currency we have, posture and breath. Stand as if your spine remembered its lineage. Not rigid like a statue performing power, but tall the way a tree is tall, rooted enough to reach. Let the back of your neck lengthen by a thread, as if a quiet hand were lifting you from above. Let your chest open by a few honest millimeters, not a pose for admiration, but a doorway for air. Your body reads these microsignals as policy changes. A lifted spine tells your chemistry that collapse is not the plan. An open chest informs the heart that there is room for rhythm. A jaw that no longer bites at silence tells the limbic system that the threat has passed. The field cannot mistake this signature. Rooms respond to it with small mercies. Conversations bend toward clarity. Timing stops punishing you for rushing because you stopped rushing. This is not about pretending to be fearless. It is about reassigning fear to its rightful rank. Fear becomes information rather than instruction. You feel its current rise and you do not shame it. You adjust your breathing until its voltage drops to a level where wisdom can speak without being shouted over. The practice is embarrassingly simple because truth rarely needs decorations. One longer exhale before the sentence that always used to come out sharp. One breath through the nose before the reply you would have had to repair. One beat of stillness at the threshold of the room that used to shrink you, giving your system time to remember it is not a guest in its own life. These are not hacks. They are ceremonies so small the world can't see them, which is exactly why they work. They repair you at the level where injury began, in the unspoken, in the unseen, in the tight centimeter between impulse and choice. Embodiment also lives in the rituals no one can applaud because they are too ordinary to post. A glass of water sipped as if hydration were a covenant with your future voice. A 2-minute pause by the window to let your eyes touch distance before your attention is asked to tunnel. A quiet "I am here" spoken into your chest before opening the door that used to demand performance. These acts are votes cast for the new frequency. One vote does not elect a future, but 1,000 small ballots counted faithfully will change the government of a life. Do not underestimate what accumulates when no one is watching. The nervous system trusts repetition more than it believes speeches. Give it the same signal often enough, and it will protect that signal with the same devotion it once used to defend your stress. Your environment will either tutor or sabotage embodiment. No talisman can save a room arranged for collapse. Look around with the kindness of someone creating conditions, not policing perfection. Notice the objects that anchor you to stories you have retired. The shirt you keep to justify a smaller version of yourself. The pile that says, "I live in delay." The notification tone that startles your heart every time and yet you call it normal. You do not need to build a sanctuary overnight. You need to remove one friction and add one permission at a time. A clean corner becomes a place where your breath remembers pace. A chair oriented toward light becomes a permission slip for wider thinking. A silence between alerts becomes a meadow where attention can graze without stampede. The external world is not separate from your internal state. It is a partner. Treat it as such, and it will volunteer to help. Language is a room you live in, even when the lights are off. The body listens to how you speak about yourself, and the field takes notes. Replace the phrases that smuggle defeat into your day with sentences that tell the truth without theatrics. "I'm trying" often means you are negotiating with your own power. "I'm learning" declares trajectory without pretending arrival. "I don't know who I am" can dissolve into panic. "I am discovering who I'm becoming" turns the same ignorance into an adventure your cells can safely sign onto. Speak quietly and your biology will relax into the story. It does not need hype. It needs honesty that does not insult its intelligence. Embodiment is not a performance for crowds. It is a pact with your edges. You will meet resistance as surely as you breathe. Old reflexes will arrive in ceremonial robes, announcing emergencies that are only echoes. You will feel the itch to prove, to hurry, to decorate your worth with productivity. Smile at the impulse the way you would at a nervous child who believes running faster will keep the sun from setting. Then show it a different pattern. Keep your pace. Finish one clean thing. Close the loop without inventing 3 more. Walk away from the conversation once your truth has landed, instead of staying to curate your image inside another person's eyes. Each time you do this, the old reflex loses jurisdiction. It will still knock. It will knock more loudly for a while, but the door will open less often, and then not at all. In relationships, embodiment means you stop renting space in other people's nervous systems to store your safety. You thank the scaffolding they once provided, and you reclaim your weight. You can love someone without handing them the breaker switch to your state. You can witness someone's storm without letting your barometer read catastrophe. You can tell the truth in fewer words because your body is not begging for approval to stabilize. This is not coldness. It is warmth with a spine. The most generous presence is one that does not leak. When you stop leaking, others feel less obligated to mop. The room fills with a quiet that people mistake for magic. It isn't. It's just coherence not making a scene. Work changes too when embodiment takes the lead. Deadlines still exist. Pressure does not vanish. But pressure stops being something you wear as an identity. It becomes a practical constraint you organize around with a steadier hand. You will notice you send fewer messages because the first one was clear. Meetings end sooner because they were conducted at the cadence of thought rather than the cadence of panic. You arrive at evening with energy you did not borrow from tomorrow. Sleep becomes an extension of coherence rather than a crash into darkness. You wake without a rescue mission. Morning finds you already on your own side. This is not a permanent state you must protect with paranoia. Embodiment is elastic. There will be days when life throws you into tight spaces, and the old armor clinks as you instinctively reach for it. Good. That is your cue to return to the choreography you trust. Feet on the floor. One slower exhale. Shoulders one notch lower. Eyes lifted a degree. A single sentence chosen for truth over style. You are not punished for forgetting. You are invited to remember faster. The skill you are building is not in vulnerability. It is return time. The quicker and gentler you return, the less damage there is to repair, and the more your life begins to feel like a river that knows its banks. Understand this. Your body is not behind your awakening. It is the instrument that makes your awakening audible. Every micro-adjustment is a tuning peg. Every breath that refuses urgency is a new string. Every boundary stated without drama is a clearer tone. Keep tuning. Keep playing. Let exactness replace intensity. Let steadiness replace spectacle. When people ask what you did to change so much, you will not have a glamorous answer. You will have this: I taught my body to trust the future I chose. And then I kept my promise in small ways until reality could hear me without me shouting. If there is one vow to carry from this topic, let it be a sentence you can live inside. I will let my breath lead my words and my posture lead my day. Speak it softly into the fibers of your morning and let the rest of your actions be its echo. The invisible will start walking. The wave will keep becoming form. And your life, once a series of heroic pushes, will begin to feel like a choreography you can dance without losing your balance, because the dancer and the dance have finally agreed on the same rhythm. This is where the flame behind you stops looking like loss and begins to look like lighting, where the hush around you is no longer misread as abandonment, but honored as the workshop where your next form is built, where the radio of your attention no longer drifts between stations because your hands have learned the dial and your breath has learned the rhythm. You did not talk your way across this threshold. You carried yourself across. One longer exhale before a reply that used to cost you. One softened jaw where argument once lived. One clear posture at the doorway that used to shrink you. What began as an idea has a body now. It stands up when you stand up. It walks into rooms before your name is called. It steadies conversations that might have spun, not by force, but by the calm gravity of a person who remembers they are not auditioning for their own life. Look back only long enough to notice what is no longer required. The role that kept your calendar full and your spirit hungry. The conversation that always demanded a performance instead of a presence. The belief that the pace of your worth must match the urgency of the world. They do not fit because you do. The greenhouse did its work. The door is open. Air moves through. The instincts that once protected you retire with dignity when you stop rehiring them out of habit. This is not a victory parade. It is cleaner than that. It is the evening you arrive with power unspent. It is the sleep that feels like a continuation of coherence rather than a collapse into dark. It is the morning that doesn't need rescuing because the first collapse of the day, wave into particle, belongs to you on purpose. You have learned to call the story by its right names. Collapse as promotion, silence as precision, the portal as a womb, attention as currency, embodiment as policy. Names matter because chemistry listens. The moment you stopped prosecuting your life for ending chapters and started reading endings as the honest arithmetic of growth, your system stopped bracing and started building. You learned to translate sensation into instruction, the tight chest as a seam opening, the restless legs as energy asking for a truer assignment, the dull ache as proof that your edges are learning their new reach. Because you refused to decorate uncertainty with old furniture, the room could become what it needed to be. Because you let potential stay plural for a breath longer than your fear preferred, the correct singular could select itself without spectacle. You also learned to respect the small. The vow you could keep beat the promise that needed an audience. The sip of water before a decision adjusted outcomes more than the fifth spreadsheet ever did. The single boundary spoken without tremor rearranged months of fatigue. You removed one anchor to an outdated self, added one permission to a truer one, and repeated until repetition became identity. This is how reality reads you now, not as a fog of wishes, but as a clear coordinate. People call you lucky because they did not see the 10,000 microvotes you cast when no one was watching. Timing looks kind because you stopped taxing it with repairs. Work composes instead of consuming you because you send fewer notes and make more music. And when echoes arrived, the text from a familiar gravity, the habit in a new outfit, the memory looping like a song, your response matured. You named them as residue, and residue lost its crown. You did not insult your past to keep your present. You blessed what sheltered you and declined the terms that still asked you to live small. You spoke fewer words and they carried more weight. You learned to leave rooms at the right sentence. You learned to love without handing anyone the breaker switch to your state. This is not distance. It is warmth with a spine. The most generous person in a room is the one who does not leak. When you stopped leaking, other people stopped mopping. The air cleared. The true work began. What happens next is less dramatic and more beautiful than the old story prepared you for. Extraordinary becomes ordinary, not because it is diminished, but because it is integrated. The frequency you once visited now wears your face in the mundane. Washing a dish becomes a small ritual of rhythm. Answering a message becomes an exercise in precision rather than a gamble against regret. Delays lose their teeth because you can feel the architecture moving even when your eyes cannot see it. Ambition learns manners. It stops sedating doubt and starts funding devotion. Service stops being theatre. It becomes resonance. You stop trying to rescue ships and stand as a lighthouse. Those who are ready orient. Those who are not drift without villainy. Your responsibility is coherence, not control. Do not fear the days when the weather changes and the old armor clinks at the edge of your reach. Forgetting is not failure here. It is a chance to practice return. Return is your true superpower. Feet to ground.
Breath longer on the way out than on the way in.
Shoulders lowered by a notch no one but you could measure. Eyes lifted a degree so the horizon remembers how to meet your gaze. One sentence chosen for truth over theatrics. Watch how quickly the chemistry follows orders. Watch how the room adjusts without being told to. Watch how your name feels lighter in your own mouth when you don't ask it to carry the weight of performance. Carry forward a reverence for maintenance. The forest that began as a seedling still asks for water. Keep voting daily for the land you live on now. Guard the morning like topsoil. Let your environment conspire in your favor. Less clutter to whisper old scripts. More light to remind your system of distance. Keep a small circle of resonance and let approval go on furlough. Curate your language the way you curate a home you intend to live in for a long time. I am learning remains the honest spell. I am here remains the doorway. I will hold the note remains enough. If you must ask one last question of yourself, let it be the one that never lies. Does this next move expand or contract my breath? Follow expansion without apology. Choose contraction only when contraction is strength, the kind that gathers you to leap, not the kind that makes you smaller to survive. You already know the difference. The body has become a fluent reader of your own life. And if you ever wonder whether any of this matters beyond your skin, remember the tuning fork. Your steadiness hums. Rooms tune. Arguments lose momentum. Children breathe easier without knowing why. Colleagues find clarity in fewer tries. Strangers feel less alone in your quiet company. This is not mysticism. It is physics with a human face. Coherent fields organize. You have become one. You are not saving the world by force. You are stabilizing it by example. Saving is panic. Stabilizing is presence. Panic leaves residue. Presence leaves room. So step from this page into the corridor of your day with the same authority you practiced here. No trumpets, no armor, just the clean prejudice of a person who has decided to be readable. Tune first, then act. Let breath lead words and posture lead hours. Treat every choice as the first collapse of a fresh timeline. When you falter, return. When you forget, remember faster. When you arrive in a room, let your field enter before your reasons. And when night comes, lay down a body that did not betray you and a mind that did not need to shout to be heard. This is the quiet completion the old you could only chase. This is the life that keeps composing itself around your signal. Wave becoming form. Form carrying light. Light refusing spectacle because it does not need to prove it shines. You did not stumble here by accident. You arrived by resonance. You do not leave as a seeker. You leave as a steward. Of breath that steadies rooms, of choices that make music, of a frequency that tells the truth without raising its voice. The old timeline is silent now. The new one is not waiting at the horizon. It is the way your feet touch the floor when you stand up. It is the way you will open the next door. It is the way you will walk through it without shrinking, because the bridge and the traveler have become the same thing.